Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for joining the first PAC meeting today. I'm Amir Zahabi. I'm the project manager for this project. I'm very excited to talk about this project with everybody and get everybody's feedback, and I appreciate your time here. We have from Parsons, Chris Redden and Erin O'Higgins here, who have prepared this presentation that they're going to walk us through it with respect to the different parts of the functional design that we have looked at so far. I also have Elizabeth Murphy, who is my program manager, and Megan Whitehead from Active Transportation Planning from the city. And I guess with that, Councillor, if you have anything to add, since this is your meeting, if not, we could start with the presentation.
Okay, well, thank everyone for making the time this evening for coming out. This is very exciting that we're finally talking about doing some connectivity and rebuilding with cycle tracks on Richmond Road. This is a road that was desperately needing work, and I'm very happy that it is finally being considered. Not only for cyclists, but also for pedestrians, where we've had major issues with the fact that the sidewalks currently look like shoulders on the road, and people even park on them. So this was well overdue, and I appreciate the interest in this, and I think it's going to be a very valuable for the community. So thanks to everyone for coming out. We welcome your input.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Councillor. I'm going to pass the mic to Erin and Chris to start the presentation. So the floor is yours. I'll mute myself.
Great. So welcome everybody to the first Public Advisory Committee meeting. We'll start with our meeting agenda. So we'll start by going through the project scope and discussing some of the key considerations and evaluation criteria. The budget constraints are a major one, so we'll touch on that a couple times. And then Chris will take you through some design options and then a chance for everybody to provide some feedback. So for the project scope, this project includes the functional design, so a high-level design for the resurfacing, sidewalk renewal, and cycling facility implementation on Richmond Road from Bayshore Drive to Pinecrest Road. The plan is that this will be constructed in the 2022 to 2023 timeframe. The next component of the project is a conceptual design for cycling facilities from Pinecrest Road to Carleen Avenue. So a much higher level conceptual design for the future cycling connectivity at the east end of the functional design limits. And the last part is a municipal class environmental assessment process. Here's a map of the study area. So there's the functional design limits here, and then the conceptual design from Pinecrest to Carleen in purple. Before we get into the functional design, I'll run you through some of the future cycling connectivity plans at the both ends of the project. So here we have to the west, and here's a picture of the Bayshore and Richmond intersection. So there are 4 future projects here that will tie into the cycling facility on Richmond Road. The first is plans for structural work and intersection modifications at Richmond Road and Bayshore Drive. So the work here will include cross rides through the intersection. Okay, sorry, my mouse isn't working. The second is a map that will go from the Bayshore Shopping Center with access towards the LRT station as part of the stage 2 LRT work. And the third is a map going south of Richmond Road over Highway 417. And the final one here is an extension of that map that will go south of Richmond Road all the way to John Sutherland, which is just west of the Queensway Carleton Hospital. And the existing map that it will connect to there goes right to Baseline Road. So that last connection will be part of the Baseline BRT project. And then we've already touched on cycling connectivity to the east. But as mentioned, the work in this project includes a conceptual design for cycling connectivity between Pinecrest and Carling. And ultimately, the cycling facilities will connect to the existing facilities east of Carling.
Pardon me, I have a quick question. Richmond Road east of Pinecrest on Richmond Road up until, let's say, McEwen. Could you just touch on how that's integrated, or is that another project?
Can you repeat I was trying to locate that in my head.
So Richmond Road, so basically the continuation, it looks like with everything with the LRT, Richmond Road coming from Westboro up to McEwen's to the Passover is being covered through a complete street program. And now we have the Richmond Road starting from Pinecrest going west. The corridor of Richmond Road between McEwen's and Pinecrest, is that being addressed in any other plan? I haven't seen anything that covers that so far.
So we're not aware of a plan for that one. I know there has been some cycling improvements made between McEwen and Carling. I'm not sure, Amir or Megan, if you're able to speak to anything else that you have in mind.
May I suggest for the person just spoke that you put on your name, please? It just says iPhone on your name, so that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, Teresa. Sorry, it's JR from the Lincoln Heights Park Community Association, and unfortunately, it's not cooperating with me right now. The phone. My apologies. That was the only one question to cover that.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. And it's just that section, and I don't want to slow down the whole meeting. Just wondering, we seem to be addressing all the areas, but not that one. I can put that to call on the side or what have you, but I'm just curious to know if I'm just missing something in the documentation.
So you're speaking about the section between sort of east of Pinecrest to, I'm not sure where McEwen, where specifically that is.
Just the continuation of Richmond Road east of Pinecrest, which goes over the crossover to where it's the bridge that goes across the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway. Okay,
so the section, I guess, between Pinecrest and Carling is a future project, and as part of this assignment, we're just looking at sort of how we would tie in from this project at Pinecrest to just east of Carling, where there's existing bike lanes. But then east of there's no immediate plans in terms of bringing that forward. There are some facilities there, although admittedly they could be upgraded at some point in the future, but we don't at this point have a project there.
Sorry, I wasn't talking Carling, I was talking Richmond Road.
Yeah,
Richmond Road from Bayshore all the way up to Pinecrest you're addressing. And then I know on the other side of the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, they're addressing from that area all the way to Westboro. So there seems to be like a 2-kilometer Richmond Road that's completely not even addressed.
So the section from Pinecrest to just east of Carling on Richmond Road is sort of, this project is looking at kind of the concept of what that future project would be. We're not moving forward yet with it, but it is kind of on our radar as a project that was in the previous cycling plan, and we believe will be carried forward into the next active transportation plan. So it is a future project, but it's not bundled in with this work. East of, sort of just east of Richmond, where there's existing bike lanes, there's not an immediate project to upgrade those any further up to sort of Lincoln Fields. So sort of just east of Carling on Richmond is where the future project right now is envisioned to end. But we are doing the active transportation plan at this time, and the consultation is expected to go forward this fall with future projects. And so certainly we could provide input if you think there's another project there that should be considered.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll just drop the topic right now because it just seems like there's that one section that's kind of a gap, and maybe we can look for another projects, and I'll pause and let you go on with the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, JR. And yes, I know there's a gap. We've talked about it, and they're dealing with this section as a whole because it needs repaving anyway, kind of thing. But that it's a pretty nasty intersection with Carling, and then crossing over to Richmond. There is, of course, a little bit of infrastructure there. You know that in front of just slightly east of Lincoln Field, but there's a hole there, and it's that intersection has to be dealt with to connect. That is going to be a major project because, as you know, it's a pretty dangerous one just for cars, never mind cyclists. But it has to be done in the long term. But this is kind of on the radar because of the just plain old fact that it's got to be redone anyway. So let's make it better.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't piecemeal, but that's how it ends up sometimes.
Okay, we'll get back to the key considerations here. So the first is that cycling and pedestrian safety are a priority. And scheduling is a big consideration. As mentioned before, the study needs to be completed by February 2022 to maintain design and construction timelines. The limited funding for this project is a key consideration, and less expensive options will be favored, as more expensive options could require work to be delayed. The impact on trees and vegetation will be considered, as well as bus stop interactions, and the fact that this road segment is not on the winter cycling network. And then here's some more evaluation criteria. So accessibility will be considered, and pedestrian safety, pedestrian comfort, corridor land use character, trees and vegetation maintenance, cycling comfort, cycling connectivity and access, cycling protection at side streets, transit priority, bus transit service, emergency service vehicles, speed maintenance, general traffic flow, minimizing conflicts with hydro poles, as well as existing services and utilities, and construction costs. So budget constraints, we touched on budget constraints before, but just to reiterate, the funding for the resurfacing and sidewalk reconstruction on Richmond Road is quite limited. So that will play a significant role in design decisions. Bike lanes will be favored over cycle tracks where the existing curb line allows it. However, some of the concept designs for some more costly construction options could be retained for future construction in some blocks. And now Chris will talk us through some design options.
Thanks, Erin. So we've picked cross sections at a number of points throughout the corridor just to discuss different options that we have. And these points were picked just kind of as representative of different sections of the corridor. When we're taking a look at them, we have a higher number, a little more fine-grained, but just to keep the presentation on track, we narrowed them down to 5 that are generally representative. In terms of the design options that we're looking at to improve the cycling facilities, we're looking at buffered bike lanes and cycle tracks. In terms of options, those are the big considerations. We also have to keep the pedestrians in mind, of course, as well, but you'll see that all of our design options include some good quality pedestrian facilities. So that'll be common to everything that we look at. So we'll start west of Belfield. So this segment, this is near the intersection of Bayshore Drive. So it's 4 lanes. Off to the left, we have that small local street. As you can see right now, there's nothing for cycling facilities. The sidewalk's quite narrow, and there's a little bit of a maintenance strip in there. So one of the options that we're looking at here, now this one's a little different. This section's a bit of an exception over those options that I mentioned earlier. So we are taking a look. One of the options that we're considering is a multi-use pathway along the south side. That would involve a grass boulevard where the street lights are, and we'd be building a 2-meter wide sidewalk on either side of the road. Next slide, please. So another option that we could take a look at here is we start narrowing some of the roads, shift the curb line in towards the center line of the road, and that gets us some space to build some cycle tracks. You'll see that because of the space constraints and the street lights there, it results in a bit of a narrower buffer than we'd always see, or than we'd like to see in an ideal situation with cycle tracks, but it is still providing some buffer. You'll also see on the right there that where possible, we're widening out the cycle track to give it a little more width. So the next segment that we'll hop to, so we're moving to the east now. In here, it's getting a little more confined. We have just one lane in each direction. There are some shoulders painted on either side of the road, which do free up some space. And then those are those narrow asphalt sidewalks. They're not as bad in this segment, but in some other segments, they're a little more degraded and they almost blend into the shoulder visually. So for a car, it almost looks like one continuous asphalt surface. So here's our depiction of the existing configuration in there. Now you'll see that while there's no specific cycling facilities, the paved shoulder does provide a bit of space, albeit not one that's very well protected from motorists. So one of the more cost-effective options that we're looking at here, keeping in mind the limited funds and how really to maximize the benefit that we can get out of them, would be to put in a buffered bike lane. So that lets us preserve the existing curb line. We'd still be putting in new sidewalks up to current standards, 2 meters wide with concrete surface. But one of the big advantages of this option is we're keeping the curb line where it is now, which can help save a lot of costs related to the drainage system, catch basins where they're placed, and then the pipes that connect those into the sewers. So another option we could look at here would be if we shift those curb lines in, really tighten up those travel lanes to 3.5 meters. So that's the narrowest that we would go for an arterial road that sees trucks and buses. So that lets us get some raised curb to help protect cyclists a little bit better. You'll see that there's not quite enough space on the right side. So under this one, we're exploring something a little different, which would see the sidewalk in behind the hydro pole, but then by moving the sidewalk behind the hydro pole, it also gets us a little more width for the cycle track itself and for the buffer. Over on the north side, there's quite the slope sloping down. So it becomes more difficult to widen in that direction. So you'll see we're holding things a little bit tighter on that side. So we'll go, now we're going past the intersection of Grenin. At the intersection of Grenin, there are some raised curbs. You can see there's a little bit of concrete sidewalk, but not a ton. And then one other thing that's worth noting is the lanes in here are a little bit tighter. There's not as much space to play in the existing surface, paved surface. So this really highlights what we're facing here. So these curb lines really do keep things in quite tight. So one thing worth mentioning is we did take a look at eliminating those left turn lanes. It's something we are still considering, but looking at the volume numbers of traffic on the road, that's pretty problematic. So we're not sure whether that's something that'll be possible. So we are keeping space for them in these options that we're presenting today. So this option is what it would look like if we did put in bike lanes. This is an interesting segment in here in that with how tight everything is, adding the bike lanes ends up actually likely being more costly because we'd be building out that full depth heavy duty asphalt suitable for a road. We'd be moving the curb line out, moving the catch basins out. So this section here near Grenin is different in that in the immediate vicinity of the intersection, cycle tracks are probably the less costly option. The other thing to note here is that we're getting closer to some trees on either side. So as we start looking at applying these options to the corridor, we have to be really careful of how close we're getting to those trees and what kind of impacts we could have on them based on their size and health. So this option is very similar. It's what it would look like if we raise up the cycle tracks. And this keeps our curb line much closer to where it is today. And then has that benefit of what we are building there, the asphalt for the cycle track can be much lighter duty than what we'd put in the roads. So those are the cost savings that you'd get by going with cycle track in this area. But then again, similar to the other option, we are close to those trees. So that's a pretty universal consideration for both of the options that we're looking at here. So this takes us further east again. You'll see that asphalt sidewalk coming back along with that shoulder. There is no, it looks the width of a parking lane, but there is no parking permitted in here. And then we've heard feedback already. I'm sure there may be some more helpful feedback today on what people are seeing out there, but we're hearing that drivers misuse that space and misuse the asphalt sidewalk. So there's definitely some room for improvement here. So this is another look at the existing condition. You can see the road's a little asymmetrical with how it's painted. So really wide shoulder on the one side with a narrower lane, and then the other side has a wider lane and a narrower shoulder. But the actual space on the asphalt's actually pretty close to being equal. So this is another one of those segments where if we can hold the existing curb line, it may end up being more cost effective. And that is one of the big considerations as we start looking at how much to apply each of these options. And how to really maximize the benefit that we can get here. This one would put the back of the sidewalk at the hydro pole, but it does fit in. So this is the version that we would see the cycle tracks raised up. There's a little bit more space here, so we can get wider cycle tracks than we were seeing in the previous option. So you'll see that we are keeping an eye to trying to maximize the space here, give that extra width on the cycle tracks where we can. Hopefully allow for some passing. We've also heard feedback on other projects that there's a bit of a preference to widen the cycle track surface before we widen the buffer, because a cyclist can operate further from the travel lane if that's more comfortable to them, but having that extra asphalt surface helps for passing where that's needed. And then this takes us to High Street. So we're almost at Pinecrest here. So this is what it looks like today. So we're starting to develop some turning lanes. We're splitting back out to 2 lanes in each direction to prepare for the intersection with Pinecrest. You'll also see a bit of a painted buffer developing in the middle. So that's to split out traffic for the concrete median for the intersection. One thing to note is that we're getting a lot tighter on space on both sides. On the north side, that's on the left of the drawing there, there's not much space behind the sidewalk before we're at the existing property line. And then on the south side over to the right, there is some space behind the hydro poles, but then we're right into those trees there, which is something that would need to be kept in mind. Oh, I don't think, so sorry, there is supposed to be a different slide there. I guess this must be a different version of the PowerPoint. So what we have in mind here is we're going to need to do an interim tie-in before we can get to the point when the next segment to the east is implemented. So these are some options that we have in mind. We didn't mean to show of how we would continue to the east once that's implemented. But in the interim, we also have to have a mind to how we would terminate this project. This project's only going to Pinecrest. So we have to think of some of the interim termination strategies, how we would develop the cycle track or bike lane heading in the westbound direction. So as that second lane disappears, how we would let cyclists out in a safe way that's also not confusing to the motorists that need to merge over. And then similar in the opposite direction as we're heading eastbound. How do we get those cyclists down to the road and get them mixed into traffic, which is not ideal, but in the interim, there has to be some kind of continuation until the funding's there to continue with a protected intersection at Pinecrest and keep heading further east. So I think that takes us to the roundtable discussion slide. Yeah, oh, here we go. Yeah, that was the one. So sorry, Aaron, can you hop back to the previous slide? I just want to make sure I didn't miss any of those tie-in talking points. Yeah, so we're looking to continue the protected cycling facility is going to connect to the existing roadway. So as I mentioned, we'll have a close eye to that detail of how we're going to get cyclists down back onto the road. And we're definitely going to have, I know they're not the greatest, but painted sharrows and other signs for motorists just to really emphasize to expect these cyclists. And then cyclists will also have the option where the cycle track ends. They'll be directly adjacent to the sidewalk. So those who choose can choose to dismount and walk if they're more comfortable with that option. So that takes us to the roundtable discussion. So I'll open the floor for comments and questions.
Thank
I'll
you.
also be keeping notes off to the left here. So if you see me typing, that's just to keep track of what everyone's saying.
Thank you, Chris. I see Stephen's had his hand up for a while. Stephen St. Denis. Hi, Stephen. Do you want to? Oh, perfect. Okay, there you go.
I I think my question was answered. It was so long ago. I'm not sure what it was. It was so long ago. I'm not sure what it was. So I'll pass.
Okay, about Sharrows.
No, I'll have to think. I'll have to think about it.
I think he said he can't remember what it was. He had something to
Okay.
share, but he can't remember what it was.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
If you
Yeah,
do think about it before we're done, please let us know.
sure.
Sure. And everyone's allowed to use chat too if they prefer. Since we got a small group, but so it's both ways. You can just put up your hand and speak, or you can use chat. Both are fine. It's nice to have a conversation. Okay, we'll get back to you. Sarah? Would you like to be next?
Sure, thank you. There's a lot to take in from all these options. I guess I have just a couple of comments. I'm not sure if these things have changed over time through the pandemic, but often it's really helpful to get some of this information before meetings or so that we can study some of the information. And I guess my other comment is that a 5 p.m. meeting time is a really bad time with kids. So I'm part of this meeting, but this is a really difficult time to be here. I just think that now that we're this far into COVID, I just wanted to share that. In the olden days, when we used to have these kinds of consultations, we would actually be in a public space where I could bring my kids and look at poster boards and ask questions. So it's hard to translate these things to the electronic way. I understand that. Personally, I do have 3 kids and I bike around all the time. This is just blocks away from where I live. I would love to be able to get out and about to more places. I also think this section of Richmond Road is very high densely populated, and it would be fantastic to offer safer walking and cycling facilities for everyone that lives in the neighborhood. And then I think I'll just end with saying that I'm going to need to take some time and study this information that you've shared with us before I have like particular reactions about some of the segments, other than a general bend towards the safer the better.
Okay, yeah, and we'll definitely share after the meeting, and we invite comments by email after the fact as well. So whatever you see, whatever you think of, we would like to hear it.
Okay, I appreciate it, Sarah. And by the way, we did ask if we could share the information ahead of time, but it was suggested that if it wasn't in context of the presentation, that it might be misunderstood. So that we did ask that. I told, because we agree that it's good to have the information ahead of time. However, and I take your point about 5 o'clock. I have to admit, that's why I was running late. It's a weird time, but it's good to remind ourselves that that's a difficult time for most parents and people that are going to use the system. But your comments, as Chris was saying, are welcome later too. Can we distribute this, Chris, to the participants? Yep. Okay, definitely. Good. So you can.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you making the time. I know it was not easy, but your viewpoint is incredibly valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Clark.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor. I had a couple initial questions, and first is what is the life expectancy of the underground infrastructure there, the pipes and stuff, which aren't in scope of this, as I understand it.
So I don't have a number on hand. I'd have to follow up with those branches of the city. I understand that when these overlay programs are scheduled, that they run that check and they won't overlay the road unless the lifespan of those pipes exceeds the planned lifespan of the surface that they're putting down. But that is a good question, and we've also run into some drainage questions that we're looking into as well. So we're definitely not we're not forgetting the underground, and that is a good consideration.
Okay, thank you. And related to what we might want this to be in the next step, if it can only be, if it's the overlay now, but I've noticed that the corridor seems pretty tight at civic address 2975. I didn't catch it in your slides if that's what you were saying, but I only saw about 28 meters. Sorry, 18 meters at that spot. Is there any indication of maybe getting some land from the property owner?
So that, I don't know the address offhand, but there is a notable narrowing, and I think it's the one you're talking about, where the properties aren't sawed off like the rest are.
Yeah, so, it's in Geo Ottawa is showing it anyway.
Yeah, okay, so that's the one I'm thinking about. So that's why we had that bullet for the municipal Class EA process. So there's different steps that we need to follow in case land is required. So we've been starting to follow all of those steps. So by the end of this study, we'll know whether that land is needed to implement these facilities that we're looking at for this project. And if it does identify the need for more land anywhere, including that tight point there, then we can get that municipal Class EA stuff going, and that would allow the city to acquire property if it's needed.
Mm-hmm. Would it be advantageous for the city to acquire it now before the property goes up even more in price?
It's a good question. It would have to be the city's real estate branch that would answer it. But my understanding is generally they don't proactively acquire land. Usually there has to be a specific use in mind and a specific knowledge that something else is going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that the one that was for sale? Are you talking about? Because there was one for sale there. Okay.
I didn't notice if it was
Not
up for
sure.
sale.
Oh, okay.
It has very wide frontage. This one, it's sort of somewhat of a pie-shaped lot.
Yeah, that's the one. We've talked to the owner, actually. They've just sold it. So I know which one you're talking about. Thank you. That's an interesting coincidence because we've been dealing with her, but I think it's sold now. So thank you. Okay. I have some questions.
Sure.
And I've sort of, it's because you're taking it section by section, and I know we've responded. I just wanted to talk about it here at the meeting. My concern was that it seemed like the option 1, option 2, just how they blend together, and without sort of feeling jarring when you're talking about the cycle tracks and cycle lanes. And my other question is, why is there budget constraints? And this should be so important.
So I'll start with the transition question. So we do have a lot of tools in our toolbox from the perspective of a motorist driving the road, which is always important when you're thinking about the safety considerations, because they're the ones that have to maintain control, not end up where they shouldn't be. They're going to have a clear, consistent edge of where they should travel. It might be a white line with a buffer. It might be a white line with some flex posts. It might be a curb, but there's always going to be a clear and well-defined line of where the motorist should be to try and keep them away from these vulnerable users. And we'd also try and align the buffer with that raised, like the painted buffer with the raised concrete buffer for cyclists. So the two buffers would line up with each other, and then the bike lane would line up with the cycle track. So cyclists would have a bit of a raise as they climb up from below curb level to above curb level. So that's about a 6-inch difference. So they'd have a bit of a ramp. There's been a lot of debate about the best detail for what to do with the curb. I understand the preference currently is to go without having a flush curb crossing the path of cyclists. So that's something we'd be looking towards, but we need to get more input on that from a variety of city groups among other stakeholders to hear what's the best transition to bring cyclists up to the cycle track.
Okay, thank you. I guess safety is the first concern, and just want to make sure that budget constraints don't affect safety, that is always prioritized for cyclists and pedestrians.
Yeah, so I can't speak to the budget constraint myself, so I'll hand that one to Megan. But before I do, we will definitely have an eye to whatever we have to work with to really maximizing the benefit and spending it where it'll have the biggest impact on safety. That's going to be one of our goals.
Okay, thank you. I see that Stephen has his hand up. So Stephen. You're still on mute.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry. I tried to hit the ask to unmute button just as he unmuted.
okay. Try again.
With regards to safety, where the two lanes merge into one, whether it be at the Bayshore end or the Pinecrest end, a lot, I won't say a lot, but so quite often if a car is turning left, the car is behind him, they just drive up on it. What now is the shoulder. If we turn that space into a bike lane, there had to be some protection, particularly in those two areas.
That is a really good point, and that's one of the reasons we really like to reach out to the public on these, because you see things that we won't necessarily be aware. And that is a good point. In these areas where cars are likely to try and pass on the right, which is not something they should be doing, it's an area that we should be focusing some of those physical interventions like a curb that can help prevent drivers from doing these things they shouldn't be. So thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. And we saw this down on Laurier unfortunately, in a very tragic way, because a cyclist was trying to go straight through the intersection and someone turned. They weren't in the turn lane. They overrode the cycle lane and hit the cyclist. So yeah, right turns are a real problem for cyclists, of course, at all intersections. So, these are very, very busy corners. But if I may, Stephen, I would like to have Chris talk about the connectivity with Bayshore, because there's supposed to be connectivity based on stage 2 LRT construction. So I think we've seen the drawings from them. How is it connecting with what's being proposed here? I think Connie may have some stuff.
So we've, From our end, we've seen some of the early drawings for what's going to go in at that intersection. And I understand it's going to have a couple bidirectional cross rides. And the general configuration is actually really helpful for what we're trying to do. It allows us, we could tie into that intersection with either something bidirectional on the south side, like that MUP option, or something unidirectional, like the cycle tracks. And that the bidirectional cross ride that goes north-south is going to help us connect either way and make those facilities work. And then they're also looking to add a bidirectional cross ride across the south side. And that would go to the MUP that's going to head further west, both the one that loops around towards the LRT station and the one that heads even further west towards Holly Acres and then eventually Baseline Road. So really we can leverage those planned improvements to make these connections work and to pick the best facility type for this section of the road.
Thank you. I think the other issue is crossing the road. And if we switch to pedestrians particularly, I've had complaints since I've been elected about trying to cross Richmond Road. At Des Maurier, there is a light, which is a godsend and very used. But between Des Maurier and Pinecrest, there isn't anything. And people are trying to get to the bus stops, which are, it's the bus 57. It's a major route, lots of major routes that head to Bayshore, head downtown. So that is something that I've heard many times. And if we're talking safety, it's not a huge expense, but it is important for people to be able to cross the road safely. And I'm hoping that that can be part of this.
So that is a good question, and I can see that with the high density buildings and the bus stops. There's always going to be a demand to get across the road, and pedestrians don't like walking 100 meters down the road to cross at a crosswalk and then walk 100 meters back. It tends not to happen. So we're already planning to reach out to the applicable city branches for safety and for signals to see what the options are there and what we can consider. There are of course the budget constraints, so we have to be wary that there's the money to back up the solution. Like a full-blown pedestrian signal can easily cost $1 million, which equates to a lot of cycle track. So it's something that we have to keep in mind. For one intersection, yes, can easily hit $1 million. If to put a PXO in is much more cost effective. So that comes down to what's the right answer, both in terms of safety and what's practical to implement rather than waiting to the indefinite future.
Well, I think it's very, very necessary as we expect people to use transit. And I wouldn't, I think Stephen knows because he lives in the area and he knows how it is crossing Richmond. That one light at Des Maurier is very, very used. But yeah, you're just as you said, high density, which we are trying to encourage. We definitely need something between that and Pinecrest. So I strongly recommend it.
My hope is maybe if we can find a safe way to make a PXO work by tightening in the sides, prevent some of that undesirable motorist behavior. But the volumes are high, which is always a challenge with the PXOs. So we're already planning to reach out and talk to the right city branches and see what we can do here, see what can be fit in, whether it's under this project or something that we make the design with an eye to a future improvement to make sure it's compatible, if it's something that can't be done right now.
I find that PXOs are scary for people. You need a full signal, and I'm a little shocked by the price tag of $1 million, but I don't know how much people are worth. But but the one on Richmond that Stage 2 put up for us, you watch the cars go through them because amber lights to motorists don't mean stop. And that's the problem. They flash amber rather than red, and
that's
so they just treat it as a flashing amber light at a intersection where one might be amber and the other might be red, but they just whip through it.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge. We don't want to build something that's going to cause an accident. So we have to be really wary of the speeds and traffic volumes and whether that's appropriate.
Yeah, it is a high volume road because it's a major route from Bell's Corners and further west, along with Carling is, but Richmond is very busy, especially when there's it's clogged up on the Queensway. Those things will happen again.
Nazra has her hand up here in her video there.
Okay.
Nazira, hi.
Nazira.
Hi, Nazira.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. I live in 2871 Richmond Road in Marina Bay, and next to us is William Mosgrove building, 2 buildings, and we have the bus stop right in front, and a lot of people take the bus who come to our buildings, and it is a real challenge for them to cross the road. So is it possible to just put like a crosswalk, that pedestrians are going to cross the road to go to that bus stop, so that the drivers can slow down and let them go? Because when the red light, when Grenin has a red light, people can stop and let these pedestrians cross over to the bus stops, because sometimes they're running to catch the bus. I have a lot of people who come to my building, like some of my caregivers, they take the bus. I'm a senior citizen, and it would help these people who come to my place, because they come by bus and they have to cross Richmond Road to come into our buildings. And also William Mosgrove is on our side, and the big building on High Road is also there on the left side. So we have a lot of volume, and I'm glad you're putting in these bike lanes, because lots of people in my building have bikes and they all ride the bikes, and it will be good to have a bike lane in front of our building. Usually they go from the back, I think. From Carling.
Thank you, Nazira.
Thank you. No, it's good. It's good to hear, and it's good to get that support for those kinds of improvements. It helps when we try and make them happen.
I have one more question. When are you going to start this project?
So we're in the first steps now, but in terms of, if you mean construction, we're looking at construction in either 2022 or 2023. So either next summer or the summer after.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nazira. It was very helpful.
Thank you, Teresa. Nice to see you again.
You too. It's been a while.
Thank you.
I see Paul and Stephen both have their hand up again. Stephen, do you have another question? Stephen?
You're muted, Stephen.
Oh, there we go.
I guess I forgot to put my hand down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That happens. Okay, so if you think of something, let us know. Paul?
Yes, thank you. Let me put my hand down. Related to people getting across the street, and just for particularly if there are bike lanes that are at the level of the roadway in segments that are chosen, can there be consideration to lowering the speed limit? I mean, between High and Belfield particularly, because it is a narrow cross section. And
that's a good question.
can we go to 50? Because I mean, you look at Woodruff north of Saville Row up to the Parkway, similar sort of idea. 50 there, except where there's a school.
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
It's a good question, and it's definitely one we can look at. We can request some speed surveys, see what speeds are out there right now, because it's it's the fastest drivers that are the problem, but if the majority are going slower, that helps justify it right away. And some of the other improvements we're looking at, pulling in the curb lines, adding the side friction of the buffers for the buffered bike lanes, or if there end up being flex posts, these are things that all contribute to lower speeds. So that is something we'll look into, and could be a big benefit if it's something we can justify and make happen.
And it
Yes.
might help people who are trying to cross mid-block, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. It can even be done ahead of time, even before this starts. I can work with traffic services about that. So we don't have to wait 2 years.
Not a high budget item.
No, it's not.
No, that's why I'm saying I could do that now by just asking them to look at that and ask for that to be lowered. But it's good to get a study going first. So yeah, not usurping what you're doing, Chris. It's just that if there's no point waiting on that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Quick wins are good, especially quick, cheap wins.
Yep. I like that. Thank you very much. That's a excellent point. And we've been lowering speed limits across the ward, neighborhood by neighborhood, with what is called a gateway signage. So at every community, you can just have a sign saying that this whole neighborhood is a certain speed, and many are choosing 30 as the speed. And this is for residential streets, some 40, some are 30. So so it's been very useful to have that. It also means you have to have some measures to get people to slow down, because signs don't just automatically get people to slow down. But speed boards help. I find I use them on Carling, for example, and it makes people conscious of how fast they are going, especially when there's a stretch with no light for them to stop. That is where you get the speeding, a nice stretch, nice straight stretch, and that is something that can be measured on Richmond.
Plus, there's the westward downhill slope as you get closer to Bayshore, which is problematic.
Yeah, there is.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. And people coming off the Queensway or the 416, takes them a while to realize those highways anymore, and that's another issue. You may notice that they have speed cameras on Bayshore in front of the school, where it's 40 kilometers an hour, and the number of people who have been caught on that is quite phenomenal. It's they've made $500,000 in front of that school on fines because that's what it took to get people to slow down. Unfortunately, those can't be put on regular roads. It's all related to in front of schools for now, but who knows in the future. Yeah, people are starting to get trained to slow down a bit. So great. Okay, so I think we can then, Chris, for next steps, we can share this information, being as we're going to put this recording up on our website, and so that people can get the information if they weren't able to attend, and then they may have further questions. So we'll make sure that we pass on any other questions to you. How does that sound?
That sounds good. And sorry, Aaron, if you could click to the next slide. I think we had a couple words just on next steps. Yeah. So we are going to have a second meeting of the same group or the same invitees. And that'll be to go over a plan view drawing showing how we're going to put all these cross sections down along the corridor. And that'll lead to a public open house before the holidays in December. And then we'll wrap up the study in February, and that's when it can get handed off to the next stage of design, getting it ready to be constructed.
Okay, we'll try and pick a more evening slot if that's okay, because that will be helpful to families. Okay, great.
So quick question, there's a lot of input I've received from my group about the section east of Pinecrest. Are you going to show the concepts in the next PAC meeting? Or what's the plan there?
Do you want to answer that one, Megan?
Sure. So I guess at this point, that is still not part of this project. What we're doing at the concept level is sort of doing some traffic analysis and just trying to sort of answer that question of what that future connection will be. So it's not part of this project, but we want to make sure that we're not building something up to Pinecrest and then we have no ability to extend it. So we're going to do sort of some feasibility internally to make sure that we have a future project there. I don't think we're really going to consult on that design at this time because that won't be built with this. And I'll just add, I don't know if before we wrap up, I know Sarah asked a question about the funding and Councillor Kavanaugh had also brought that up. I can touch on that as well if people want to hear about how this is funded and how that works. But Paul, does that answer your question? So in relation to the funding, so asset management's paying for the sidewalk renewal and the resurfacing, and then the cycling facilities program, which is an annual program in the city budget, is paying for the cycling improvements here. So unlike an integrated project where we dig up the whole road and you can put it back together any way you want, we're really paying for sort of that retrofit cost of relocating things to put in the cycling facilities. So we're trying to find the right balance between a very high quality facility, which would be a cycle track, and also not relocating all of the curbs and spending all of the money when there's so many other good projects like the one further east here that we'd also like to fund. And so at least the concept that we think we're going forward with is putting in the cycle tracks where we most need them, perhaps where those conflicts are with cars, and to make sure that they're put in the places where we need them for safety. But then in locations where there aren't those conflicts, then maybe a buffered painted bike lane is acceptable. And certainly we're interested in your feedback on that, finding that right balance between that money, because anything that's not spent here goes to the next cycling program in the list, and there's a long list of them. So so that's sort of what we're trying to find the right balance of here. In terms of the transportation master plan, we expect it to extend this cycling facilities program that we run every year. And we do expect it to be partially funding this project. So some of the money for this project is coming from that 2023 budget. But we believe that will continue and that money will come forward. So this is sort of being prioritized for that money at this time.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I appreciate everyone coming out this evening, and we'll keep everyone informed through our newsletter to let you know about the next meeting and a public open house. Public open house, I'm hoping that will be in a atmosphere where we can actually be in person. But if it's not, how do we, I guess the public open house will be similar to this format of having showing slides on Zoom. If we don't have the ability to be in person.
There's different formats that we've used for different projects. We're hoping as well that perhaps we can hold one in person again. It'd be nice to have some display boards and be able to chat in person. But if that's not possible, I'll have a conversation with Amir on what the best format is for this project in specific. Some of the bigger ones, we do recorded presentations because the number of people watching is just too big to have a good Q&A. This one might be a smaller size where this kind of Zoom format might be suitable. So that's definitely something we could consider.
Okay, well, this worked out well tonight, and lots of good questions. Appreciate the perspective. We had different perspectives of different groups that live nearby, and I appreciate that. Okay, thank you, Chris, and to your whole team, to everyone, and thank you for coming out, and have a good rest of the evening.
Thanks everyone for your input.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.